Então,
o amanhecer não é apenas uma nova manhã, mas o nascimento de ideias que têm o poder de remodelar o futuro. É assim que trabalhamos.
Se você não sabe, chegou a hora de saber. A USP é de todos, a USP está em você.
Nos dias atuais, o tema sustentabilidade tem se destacado e a discussão sobre a qualidade dos recursos ambientais vem à tona para repensarmos sobre nosso modo de vida.
good morning for everybody. My name is Tadeu Malheiros. I work at the University of São Paulo in the School of Public Health. I will be coordinating the roundtable this morning and responsible for the activities. First of all, I would like to just to give a context about the SUSTENTARE+WIPIS 2024. It's a partnership among University of São Paulo, University of Campinas, and PUC Campinas, and the Water Committee of Piracicaba, Capivari, Jundiaí. We are doing together, the University of São Paulo and PUC Campinas, we are doing together since 5 years. Every year we are doing this online scientific event. We have tried at least every year to innovate and bring new topics, as also bring new models of operation in the system, how we are doing activities online, hybridus, and presential. We have had many people registered in the event, and the last year's 5,000. Last year it was 8,000 people. This year, almost 6,000 people enrolled in the event. Most of them participate online. So we have people participating in all Brazil and also in Latin America and other continents. So it's always quite interesting about the diversity of people, the discussions we have, and the opportunity also to bring the topic of sustainability and all the interfaces and spread this for other institutions. It has been a challenge also for us, so how to engage more the undergrad and grad students. So we also decided since last year that a few of our activities would be presential. So it's the case for today. The roundtable we'll have is presential. It's happening here at the School of Public Health. And with the topic, circularity in water and sanitation system, benchmarking and challenges. For today, we will have 2 speakers. Both are professors, and Francis de los Reis is a good friend. We have met and we are working together. We started to work under the UGPN. It's a global network among University of São Paulo, the North Carolina State University, and also the University of Surrey. We started working on water and sanitation, and now we are moving on with a joint project funded by FAPESP. And Francis de los Reis is a professor at the Department of Civil Construction and Environmental Engineering. Is the one of the leading academic researchers and pioneers in the field of integrated biological process engineering and molecular biological tools to improve the analysis, design, and operation of engineered and natural waste treatment and waste-to-energy and waste-to-resource systems. I've been with Francis last year, and I was quite impressed. He was very kind with me. Sometimes I'm ashamed. He took me for several wastewater treatment plants, water treatment. So it was very nice. He took me to know about the water and sanitation system in the surrounding of Raleigh. And but also I was quite impressed of the labs and activities and ongoing projects in the North Carolina state. So I'm very grateful for all his kindness and in this partnership. And our second speaker for today is my colleague, Professor José Carlos Mierzwa. He is a professor at the School of Engineering, Polytechnic School of Engineering, and he has coordinated for long. He has, as far as I know, started and coordinated the environmental engineering undergrad course at the Polytechnic Engineering School. But he's quite engaged, and it's a very well-known professor and researcher in the topic of water and reuse of water and also wastewater aspects. He has implemented several projects inside and outside the University of São Paulo. He's also working with us at the environmental management superintendents of the University of São Paulo and contributing with all the activities. So this is the topic. These are the speakers, and I'll just give a context why we are bringing a circularity discussion, this topic about circularity in the water and sanitation system, especially in the context of Brazil. I would say that the major challenges for the water operators is going to be to give universal access to all people of these services. It's still a challenge to reach the poor communities. We still have many gaps. They are related to many aspects in the urban areas, but we also have challenges for rural areas. And I think this will be this will be the main challenge for these operators in the following years. This is also very complex. There is few money. Most of the operators don't charge enough that they can pay the operations and also investments. So it has been a discussion, a long discussion in Brazil, how to finance all these targets of universal access and also to reach the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 and also the goals of the national policy. So the universities are working, and the groups related to this topic are discussing which are the solutions that we should bring. Some of them are related to technology, and some of them are related to management. But the aspect of creating new opportunities within the operation is also a challenge, but it's also a solution to have more revenues and give sustainability to all these systems. We have been working closer to the Piracicaba, Capivari, Jundiaí watershed. It's in São Paulo State, very close to the city of São Paulo and in the surrounding of the city of Campinas. It's a watershed with 75 municipalities. And what we have learned working with all these operators is that there is a challenge, of course, about this target of universal access. There are still some municipalities that, for the majority, providing water has not been a problem. There is a network that reach, especially the urban areas. But for collecting and treating wastewater, still some municipalities don't reach the 100% for all treatment. But part of them are still deficitary in terms of revenue. Also, the solutions, especially for the solids related to the wastewater treatment plants, and energy efficiency and emission of carbon has been in discussion within the system. And what we are worried, and this is what we are provoking our speakers, is in this watershed, the availability of water per capita is very low. So we have to find solutions for the future, especially in the climate change scenarios, that we can provide water for everybody with quality and quantity for everybody, but also in periods of very dry and long periods that the watershed has faced. So circularity appears to be a part of the strategy to gain sustainability in the system. Last year, when I was visiting Francis, he took me to many wastewater treatment plants, and I think, if not all, almost all of them are connected. They treat the wastewater, most of them in tertiary treatment systems, and they bring back the water for the communities where they took it, or for the urban areas, or for rural areas. So there is a present, and I saw working all these reuse system. Also, I saw for sludge that they are producing biosolids and giving this back or selling this back to the rural areas for agriculture. So, and also some of them are producing biogas. So what I see in this context is an opportunity for new business, for producing energy, for producing fertilizants, and also for producing water that can be used in the urban areas. In the Piracicaba, Capivari context, most of our wastewater treatment system that are implemented, they are secondary treatment level. Probably some of them we will invest in tertiary system, and some of them that have up to now no system, they are investing in, but they are bringing solutions, I would say very conventional solutions, and they should, in my point of view, and that's, I think, the challenge we are provoking here, they should already project wastewater treatment systems that could include circularity. So this is what's behind the discussion we'll have today, that I think putting together these operators, putting together the regulators we have, the environmental regulator, the water and sanitation regulator, and also the funding that's coming from the national and state level, we should retrofit the ongoing system, but also for the new wastewater treatment plants, we already should have circularity as a main criteria for designing these new plants. And so that's, I think, the challenge for our two speakers. Francis will talk about the United States context, and especially in the rally context, how this is being implemented and how it's working, and which are the technological but also cultural and normative, but also cultural aspects related to the water reuse. And the Professor Miesva will talk about the Brazilian context, and also because we still have a gap, and I think it's the role of the university also to push and bring credibility that's possible to build safe systems and provide sustainable solutions for our municipalities. In this context, I invite my colleague, Professor Francis, to give his speech, and I thank again both our colleagues to accept our invitation. You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Tadeo. So today I want to talk about the context in the U.S. in terms of circular economy, and it's going to have some examples. Obviously, there are lots of examples that we can point to, but I wanted to start with trying to put a framework on our analysis of what we call circular economy. And here I'm borrowing a framework in the climate change and emissions sector when they talk about the scopes, right? Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. So basically, Scope 1 is what we call within the plant, within the fence, inside the fence circularity. And that's where I might reuse within the plant energy, I might reuse resources within the plant. Scope 2 is maybe the larger context outside the plant also. That might include the whole urban environment, the whole city, for example, or a regional basis. And then Scope 3 might be, the widest context. It might include, as I bring in chemicals, as I bring in transportation needs into the water and sanitation sector, then I can also have circularity there, right? So for today, I'm going to give examples of what I would call Scope 1 and Scope 2 circularity. And this is a diagram I borrowed from this paper. It came out a couple of years ago. And this is really a climate change paper, an emissions paper, but I like the drawing, and I think that basically shows you what I'm talking about. Think of Scope 1 as that boundary condition within the plant, and this is in the context of wastewater treatment. And so within the plant, I can have circularity already, right? And then Scope 2 might be the urban infrastructure that's related to the treatment plant. And so for me, that's thinking about not just wastewater, but also water, right? So how do we start doing water reuse, for example? And then obviously, Scope 3 is the larger human society and ecological system. You can think of circularity there at that larger system, but I want to focus on, again, within the plant and also the water and sanitation sector. So what are we doing right now? And this is the historical, inertia, if you will, of our system in terms of centralized water infrastructure. So typically, we get our raw water, our supply from surface water or groundwater. Here I'm showing a reservoir that was created specifically to get, raw water. It may be a lake, it may be a man-made reservoir. And then we get that water, we treat that in a drinking water treatment plant. And then we pipe that treated water, very clean water, millions of gallons per day or millions of liters per day. Sorry, I gotta think metric. And maybe thousands of kilometers. So a typical system might have, for example, the city of Atlanta has 2,000 miles. So that's roughly, 3,500 kilometers of pipes for drinking water, and about the same, 3,500, 3,600 kilometers of pipes for wastewater. And then other cities like Charlotte, which is the biggest city in North Carolina, it's double that. It's a more spread city, so it's actually more like 7,000 kilometers of pipes, pipe network. So we pump millions of liters per day through these thousands of miles of pipe. Lots of energy involved with that, right? And then we use that clean drinking water to flush our toilets, right? That's what we're doing right now. Then we collect all that wastewater, same deal, sewage lines that are, thousands of kilometers of pipes. And then we treat that in a large wastewater treatment plant so that we can discharge that water into another river, another lake. And then the cycle goes on. And so there's some inherent circularity here in that I might be a utility or a town or a city. I put my treated wastewater into a river or lake, and that same river or lake might be the drinking water source for another town or municipality downstream. That's happening in my area where there's a lake in North Carolina where the South Durham wastewater treatment plant puts its water into Jordan Lake, and Jordan Lake is the source of drinking water for two other major towns in that region. So there is already some indirect, if you will, right, reuse of water, and that's happening all over the world. So it's just a part of the water cycle now. So we need this to be more circular because right now it's very linear, right? Even though we do have that, what I would call non-intended reuse of water. And so this is a diagram from a report from Arcadis that talks about how we can save energy, how we can lower greenhouse gas emissions, how we can avoid hydrologic cycle disruptions. This is because we're trying to get usually water from one basin and we're trying to return it to that same basin, but sometimes we return the water to a different basin. So there's inter-basin transfer. And then also capital and operation expenditures. So this diagram is showing us how we can reuse wastewater, recycle that, and then use that, in this case, for water in the home. The diagram here is showing that. What Professor Tadeo was talking about was, for example, in the city of Raleigh and the town of Cary, close to North Carolina State University, they actually treat the water to the quality where they can be used for irrigation, mostly irrigation. So it's not yet for toilet flushing, but it's mostly for irrigation. So maybe 5% to 10% of the wastewater can be used for that. So they would have additional chlorination, for example. So here's an example where basically in the US, people are now talking about indirect potable reuse and direct potable reuse. So let's define those things. Indirect is where I treat the wastewater, and then that wastewater, so here I'm treating the wastewater using my water reclamation plant, and this is the city of San Diego in California. And that tertiary effluent then goes to an advanced water purification facility. So it's composed of membrane filtration, maybe down to reverse osmosis. So very, very small pore sizes, removes almost everything. And then maybe you have additional disinfection, in this case UV peroxide. And then that water is put into a reservoir. So it's a natural reservoir, a natural system. And then that becomes the source of raw water for a city. And it goes through the same traditional drinking water treatment plant system, right? So this is what traditionally is called indirect potable reuse. So countries like Singapore have been doing this for a long time now. The New Water Project, very similar. 50% of their water in Singapore is pretty much recycled wastewater. And so now this is happening in places like California. So just to show you what's happening now, California is now taking the next step to have direct potable reuse. So what is direct potable reuse? I don't put the wastewater effluent into a reservoir. I put it straight into my drinking water treatment plant. So it really is directly doing that. This came out just a few months ago. It's basically showing that following years of research and public engagement, which is very, very important, right? It's not so much the technical part. It's actually the education of the public, the engagement of the public, because, you know, before we called it toilet to tap, and that's not a really good term, right? Because if you call it that way, people think, oh, I'm drinking my toilet water. But it's not really true, right? You're drinking very highly treated water. And so basically, there is now regulations that's been approved in California. And so starting just last month, October 1, 2024, these regulations are now in place in California. And the reason is that California, as you know, has an issue with a growing population, but then a lack of sources of water in many of the urban districts. For example, in Southern California, where San Diego is. You know, maybe not so much in Northern California, but when you have a big drought, Southern California is a big issue. This is true for other states too. So Nevada, for example, Western states, and maybe even Southern states like Texas, parts of Texas. So just to summarize, this is a diagram from the Water Reuse Foundation. What I'm talking about is wastewater treatment, and it says including source control. So that's very important to make sure that you don't have discharges from industry, for example, that is going to make your wastewater treatment process less effective. And then you have advanced purification. And so these are some of the technologies involved. Maybe ozone, you know, for oxidation and disinfection. Activated carbon for removal of organics. A big issue in the US right now is PFAS, perfluorinated substances. Probably have heard about this. You know, it's a byproduct of Teflon and water repellent chemicals that we put in our clothes, in our shoes, in our furniture, you know, firefighting foams. That has contaminated a lot of water sources, and it's very hard to degrade and remove from the environment. Also, obviously, things like personal products, you know, pharmaceutical products, hormones, those types of things. So activated carbon is quite good at removing organic contaminants. And then I mentioned membrane filtration, RO, and then UV advanced oxidation processes and disinfection. And then that water goes straight to the drinking water plant, and then also for water use. And then you close the cycle. So this is direct potable reuse. It's a little bit small, but this is a map of California and all the potable reuse projects. And you can find this map from the Water Reuse Foundation. And basically, it's funny because the units are acre feet per year, which is very American, right? So surface area, 1 acre, 1 foot, and that's equivalent to about 3,377 liters per day. So if you think about all of the potable reuse projects, the colors are basically looking at groundwater. In other words, you treat the wastewater, you put it back to the ground, and then that groundwater is the source. The aquifer is the source for drinking water, or surface water, and also future plants. Here is a more magnified image for just Los Angeles, which is Southern California. So we already have existing 93,000 acre feet per year, but the planned one is equivalent to about 1,377 MLD, million liters per day. So it's happening. And again, these are all the different plans. Existing is the red, and then the plans are there. Different cities are planning pretty much potable reuse projects in California. Let me give you an example of within the fence or inside the fence circularity. Here is a process for biosolids treatment called thermal hydrolysis. So what this is basically it's pressure cooking biosolids. So the biosolids you produce, for example, from your biological activated sludge system, you usually put that into an anaerobic digester. The anaerobic digester gives you biogas, methane, that you can reuse for energy. But this process happens before the digester. You actually put the biosolids through high pressure and high temperature, maybe 90 psi or 165 degrees centigrade, a few atmosphere, and that basically opens up the cells like pressure cooking. And what that does, it allows the following anaerobic digestion to be more efficient, more effective, and creating more methane. So these are the benefits. You can lower your anaerobic digester volume, which means you have a lower capital cost. You can increase your biogas production, even if it's just a 20% increase, that's greater revenue. Your volatile solids reduction means that you don't have hauling costs. You lower your hauling costs. Your cake solids will be higher in solids content, lower moisture. So again, you will lower your transportation costs, and then you'll get a Class A product because pretty much your biosolids is sterilized, and that's good for the environment. So in the city of Raleigh, where I'm from, they have implemented this, and I'm gonna just show you what they've added. Is here in the bottom. So from the secondary clarifier, waste activated sludge, that's thickened, mixed with the primary sludge here. And then you have some screening, dewatering, and so the centrate goes back to the plant, the liquid side. But the biosolids now go through this thermal hydrolysis process. And then you put that into the anaerobic digester, which means you get an increase in biogas production. And what they're going to do with that is basically they're going to have renewable natural gas to power the city buses. So this is the circularity involved from inside the plant, right? But now I'm creating energy so I can actually power some of the buses for the city. Another example, if I think about widening this, is how do I do something like co-digestion of food waste? So in the US, you have billions of pounds of food waste. The statistic is globally 38% of food from farm to fork goes uneaten. It becomes waste, whether waste at the farm, waste in the transport, or in the restaurants, or in the houses. Almost 40%. That's a lot of food waste. There's also a lot of grease waste. So this is the fats, oils, and the grease. So in the US, we have grease interceptors, which basically prevent, these are like settling tanks. After a restaurant, you have these settling tanks. They're on the ground, under the ground, and basically they allow the capture of the fats, the oils, and the grease to float on top, and that's recovered. The reason for that is you don't want that to go to the sewer line, because then you get all these fog deposits, and they block the sewer lines, and then you get all kinds of issues, right? I don't know if you've heard of the fatbergs in London and everywhere around the world. They're finding all of these tons and tons of fats and oils and grease deposits in sewer lines. But if fats and oils are very high energy, high calorie content. So what you can do is you can actually collect some of that. And here I'm showing you a sampling of a grease interceptor. It looks like this. And then you can actually look at how much fats and oil and grease are in these interceptors. We've done a lot of experiments in our lab to determine how good this is if we co-digest that in anaerobic digesters. And I'm showing you essentially a graph. On the x-axis is the organic loading rate of the food waste added in co-digestion. On the y-axis is the methane yield in volume of methane per gram of grease interceptor waste added as volatile solids. And what you want is the very high numbers, right? And so these very high numbers are actually from our experiments, up to 0.7 to 0.8 liters of methane per gram VS added. And you can reach those if you do it right, if you train your digester. So if you just feed this directly, your digester will die. It's too much load, too fast. But if you do it correctly, you train him step by step, and you feed them the right substrates, you can get to those high values. So this is just summarizing a lot of research data. Okay, we have a big issue still in the US in that, it needs to be sustainable still. I think Professor Tadeo mentioned that, again, because of greenhouse gas emissions and energy and capital expenditures, our infrastructure needs to be sustainable. Right now in the US, our infrastructure for water and sanitation is so behind. We need still billions of dollars, about $20+ billion over the next 10, 20 years to just update the pipes. Very, very expensive. Typically, it's $1 million to a few $1,000,000 per mile of pipe that you replace, because you got to dig it out, you got to replace it. Yeah. So one possible vision is reducing water use, and I'm putting here a big vision of 75% reduction and 50% reduction in energy. So I'll talk about that. The next issue is climate change. Where basically, if you have extreme flooding happening, and if you have issues like what happened in Western North Carolina, you can have whole plants, drinking water and wastewater, just in one day be destroyed underwater. The city of Asheville in Western North Carolina didn't have potable water for 50+ days, almost 60 days. They just got the first drinking water 2 days ago. And so can you imagine 100,000 people, most of the city actually not having drinking water. And that's because of climate change. So that's an issue, resilience. And then finally, equity. In the US, we have, you'd think the US, everybody has water and sanitation, but actually no, we have 2.2 million Americans, and that's a low estimate, who don't have access to clean drinking water and safe sanitation. Maybe they have a toilet, but then we have sometimes in some parts of the country, the toilet is flushed, the wastewater just goes to the backyard, and it basically goes in the backyard like a cesspool. Big issue, because this is a question of equity. Most of these situations happen in low income and communities of color. So there's a racial and income issue here that we have to be aware of. The issue is that most centralized systems in the US obviously reach the people in the urban areas. They're close enough to be connected. But in the rural areas, you actually have people who are not connected to the centralized sewer line because it's too far, too expensive. So in some states, septic tanks are 50% of the wastewater treatment, on-site treatment systems. So what's needed, in my mind, is a more integrated water system. And these are some quotes from some thinkers and some papers where basically they're saying we need to rethink this. We need to rethink this integration, make sure that we are innovating, and we need radical innovation. So here is where I'm putting out this goal, at least in the US, 75% reduction in water use. That's a huge goal. And 50% reduction in energy, right? This is what we call a big, audacious goal. Where are these numbers coming from? Okay, so let's think about reduction in water use. So the average water use in the home is this. About 1/4 is for flushing toilets. Remember, we're flushing it with clean drinking water, right? About another 1/5 is for washing your clothes. And then you have the other half, maybe showers and sinks, right? This number right away is what? 47% right off the bat if you don't use clean drinking water for this, right? There is no point in using clean drinking water for flushing your toilet. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the average water system loss because of leaks in the sewers and leaks in the distribution pipes is about 16%. And of course, some are higher, some are lower, right? The newer systems are lower, 5% or less, very good. But some systems may be as high as 20%, just water losses because of this kilometers, thousands of kilometers of pipes. Okay, and so this paper put out by Arcadis was talking about we can get it down from 260 liters per capita per day down to 50 liters per capita per day in the US. And we can do it if we take out that 50% right away. We can do it with more efficient appliances and smart appliances and taking care of the leaks. What about the 50% reduction in energy? So here, I just used the number that's been published. For centralized system, this is per person, right? 8 watts for transport, and then 4.5 watts for water treatment, 5 watts for wastewater treatment. If I just reduce that transport from 8 to 0.8, right away I get a 41% reduction in energy. If I don't have to pump water long distances, large volumes every day. So that's just kind of like back of the envelope, rough calculations. But you can see how we can get to 75-50, right? Okay, so what I'm talking about is transitioning to what I call an integrated socio-tactical system. So right now, we have centralized systems or grid-dominated systems in the US. And we've talked about how sometimes that's not sustainable, that's not resilient, and that's not equitable. Okay. For the most part, it works well, right? And it works for a lot of people, but it also leaves some people behind. So what I'm proposing is we transition to a more sustainable, resilient, equitable, and circular system. And the way to do that is to integrate the technical and the social system, and also to have other types of approaches like hybrid systems. Maybe some places are centralized in their water, but decentralized in their wastewater. Okay, maybe some cities, some of them are centralized and some are decentralized or distributed. Maybe we have small grid or cluster systems. In other words, neighborhoods, hundreds of houses instead of the whole city. And these dozens or hundreds of houses share their own wastewater system, right? Or maybe, in the most decentralized case, the house itself is basically where you find the technologies for reusing the water. So I'll talk about this a little bit more. So this is more about the future, right? So this is what I'm talking about. A system of systems where you might have a small community system, you might have cluster systems, and then you might have a fully decentralized system just within the house. So let me show you what that looks like. Well, first let me go through the advantages, right, of decentralized systems or hybrid systems. I talked about avoiding the long pipes and pumps, flexibility, because now I can design these systems according to need, according to use, and I can also put the jobs in the local communities. From the environmental side, I can reduce the energy footprint. I can extend regional supplies by recycling water on site, so there's no inter-basin transfer. And then I can allow opportunities for resource recovery and green spaces if I do this right. And then from a social side, the resiliency to community events. So for example, in Western North Carolina, when the drinking water system was down, you have the whole city without water. If you have a lot of smaller systems, then you can bring those systems online one by one, and then basically you can get some people water already very early on, right? And when you have water in one spot, you can support other surrounding communities. For a while, the first 10 days, they didn't actually have any water in the pipes, and people couldn't flush their toilets. And so they had people doing water brigades, going house by house, giving people water just so they can flush their water, so the toilets can work. So in other words, communities came together, but what if we don't rely on the centralized system and we had actually smaller systems? It can be more flexible that way, right? And then increase local control, and then tailoring of the treatment to meet purpose. In other words, we're not treating it to the level that's needed for drinking water if we're just using it for irrigation or for flushing our toilets. And then finally, to address the inequity gap, because for a lot of these places, in rural areas, low-income communities, this is the way for them to get access to water and sanitation. So how is this going to work? There are lots of questions about this. So this is just a kind of like a radical innovation, an idea, right? So one of the questions with these issues is always, who's going to operate the small plants? Who's going to operate the household systems, right? We are used to just flushing it. We don't really care what happens. Flush it to forget it. The household is really not involved in, water or wastewater. They take it for granted unless there's a problem, right? When there's a problem, now we have to call the plumber. Now we have to do all kinds of things. To me, the solution is, in some ways, two things. One is technology. So if we have sensors, we can digitalize the data, okay? And so what's going to happen is that in terms of operation, only a few people are really needed. Maybe the utility can decentralize it so that the operators can just watch the screen and operate maybe 20 treatment systems around the city, because they are relying on sensors and they're relying on data coming into them, maybe through Wi-Fi, right? And so they can see which plant needs work, they can see which plants need maintenance, and they can monitor it from afar. And so you don't need to have an operator for each small system. One operator can operate a lot of different systems. So this is called the circuit rider concept, where you have one operator like going around fixing what's wrong and maintaining the system. So that's kind of like one way of thinking about it. The second is involving the community. This is why it's an integrated socio-technical system, right? This means that people are going to be more aware of what's going on in their water, and they'll be conscious about what they put in their wastewater, because they know perhaps that gray water is going to be recycled, right? So the social part of it is very important. So let me give you an idea of circularity within a single household. So I'm calling this the house of the future of water. So first we got to realize that there are many different kinds of water that we produce, wastewater. So we have yellow water, which is the urine. We have gray water, which is from sinks and showers and bathtubs. And then we have the brown water, which is the one from the toilet. And those need different kinds of treatment. So with urine, for example, you can treat that so that you can actually recycle the nutrients, maybe nitrogen and phosphorus, right? And then with gray water, you can treat that. So what's going to happen is that it can actually be used back in your house for flushing the toilet, right? Or washing your clothes. So this is where we have to be comfortable with the technology, where basically the gray water is going to be treated to the extent that we will use it for washing our clothes, okay? And this is going to happen with sensors, right? And novel technologies. So imagine if my sensors are connected so that I have on my cell phone, right? I can check my water quality and I can check my water quantity on my cell phone, right? So right now I can do that with, if you had a camera at home, you can see who's going into your house, right? If you have a controlled thermostat, right now, right here, right now, I can check the temperature at my house. I can change the temperature at my house, right? I can adjust my thermostat in the US from Brazil. Why can I not check my water quality right now, right? So this requires sensors, and this requires me being able to see that quality. So it's not yet here, but it's coming. I can tell you of a few projects, and I didn't put the slides on. In New York, there's an apartment complex called the Solaire Apartments. They are recycling their gray water. This is a 50-story apartment complex in Manhattan, and they're already doing 50% less water than other apartments because they're recycling the gray water just to flush their toilets and for irrigation of their green spaces. In Eyavog in Switzerland, they have a project called the Water Hub. You can look it up, and they actually have like an office building. It's a research facility. In the basement, just like this, they have treatment systems for yellow water and gray water and brown water. So you can actually see that it's going to happen. We are behind on the sensors, but it's also happening. A lot of companies are investing into the sensor technology. And once you have it digitized, it's easy now to get it into Wi-Fi and so on, right? So that, I think, is happening in the next 10 to 20 years. We would be able to control this. Initially, it's going to be expensive, these technologies, right? But then, like all technologies, it should come down in price as more people, the manufacturing goes up and so on. So that to me is one version of circularity where we can actually reduce our water use and even reduce our energy use. Because once you have it at this scale, you can think about solar panels, for example, right? Renewable energy to pilot all of these, right? You don't really need the huge electricity costs in a centralized system. Where is this going? It's interesting. The Water Environment Federation in the US, which is the largest North American professional organization for wastewater, just published, I think it's published now. I was part of the group of authors, a distributed wastewater system framework for the US. So the thinking is happening, maybe not to this extreme, but people now are thinking about not just centralized systems, but also distributed or decentralized systems. And that's where you can get your sustainability, your resilience, and then hopefully your equity, and make sure that we have access for all peoples. And hopefully this can also translate to technologies in low and medium income countries. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. That was provoking. And I think it's more than provoking. You showed concrete case. So I like that. It's not only problematizing, but bringing solutions and solutions that are already happening. So this is very incentivizing. And I'm quite curious. I have some questions, but I will keep them for our discussion. And now I would like to invite my colleague Miersva. Be welcome, and thanks again for joining us and bringing ideas for us.
Thank you, Professor Tadeu, for the invitation, and also congratulations, Professor, for your brilliant presentation before. Actually, I'm from the University of São Paulo, from the Department of Environmental Engineering, as Professor Tadeu told, and I will talk about the water circularity, but basically I will focus on the problem that we are facing here in the metropolitan region of São Paulo, Brazil, which is related to water scarcity. And of course, water circularity, as it have been showed before, it's a quite important tool, or maybe an option to solve the problems of water scarcity in many countries or many regions of the world, and even here in our country. So basically, why are you talking about water crisis here in Brazil? Because most people who doesn't live in Brazil, I think, so Brazil has a lot of water. We have almost 12% of all fresh water in the world. But the problem is that the water and the people are not in the same place. So we have A lot of water in the north region of Brazil. Maybe by the numbers that I have raised before, we have most of 63% of all water, fresh water of Brazil is in the north region, but we have there only 8% of the population. And the southeast region is quite different. So we have a lot of people, more than 44% of the population, less than 4% of the water. So the water crisis is related to this both things. The natural scarcity and the problems of land planning, so how people occupy the land, and also what we do with the sewage after you use the water. So a scarcity is also related to the pollution of the water bodies. So as Professor Francis told, so we catch the water and we use the water and we produce wastewater, and this wastewater goes to a sewage treatment plant or not. It depends of the place. In Brazil, we have many situations where the sewage doesn't go to any treatment system. It goes directly to the receiving body. So we have some problems that you should discuss. So to cope with this water scarce problem, we have to have a lot of maybe solutions or even options to devise the best proposal for any region, for different regions. So each region has different problems, and the solutions should be also adequate to the type of problems that we have. So in Brazil, of course, many people are blaming the climate change because of the water scarcity or water problems. But here in the metropolitan region in São Paulo, we already knew about the water scarcity in the 60s, the last century. So most of the people who worked in the area of hydrology and hydric resource management already know that we will face some problems with water, because the region is not, we don't have abundant source of waters, is in the watershed formation. So we don't have big rivers or big lakes to store and catch the water for using. So that is the biggest problem. And of course, because of the population. So the metropolitan region of São Paulo has more than 22 million people living around. So it's 39 municipalities, which is embraced in the metropolitan region. So that is one of the problems that we are facing. And of course, we have this. So the lack of sanitation in many places, the problem of foam in the rivers because of the lack of sewage treatment. You see here in this picture of the bottom right and the upper left. Some problems that you face here, because we use a lot of detergent, which is biodegradable, but if you don't have the sewage treatment plant to biodegrade it, it will remain active in the environment. So that is one of the biggest issues that we have. So what are the options to cope with these problems? Professor Franz already told a lot of the solutions, but one of which is more important is use the water more efficiently. So we have a lot of places or a lot of homes or industries that use process and fixtures that are not, don't use the water in a economical way. So we have quite old fixtures in the apartments or in the house. And nowadays we can, of course, change in this kind of equipment reduce the water consumption. I did a study here in São Paulo when we have the crisis in 2014, 2016. So the investment that they did to put in place another water system production to bring water from one place to São Paulo, if you invested in replacing this fixture, we would be able to reduce more water than it was brought to São Paulo, maybe 2 times more. So the investment was around 3 billion of reals at the time for bringing 4 cubic meters per second of water to the metropolitan region. With this money, you would be able to reduce the consumption by 10 cubic meters per second. So without having the problems of generate more sewage and even to spend more energy. So the kind of the circularity issue is related to that. So the most efficient way to use or to reduce the water consumption is optimizing its use. And of course, we need to improve the production process of water treatment in order to have a better condition for keeping our water resource unpolluted. So using new technologies is quite important, even for wastewater treatment. So people here in São Paulo are trying, or even in Brazil, are trying to use technology that are not adequate to the problems that you have right now. So you have a lot of problems, and of course you need to devise the best solution to the problem that you have, not to adapt a kind of solution or adapt our problem to the solution. And finally, you have the water reuse, which is the topic that I will focus with you, because I started to work with water reuse by 1991, when I started my career as a chemical engineer. But it was an industrial process, because there we didn't have water to develop the process. So I just devised a water treatment system encompassing the zero release concept of treatment. So all the water that enter in the process would be reused. So of course you have the solid waste, but in terms of water, all the water, it was a quite innovative approach that was developed in Brazil. It was my master thesis. And we implemented a pilot plant in the place, and it was very successful for this. So water reuse can be combined, of course, with this first options, which is reduce the consumption. Water reuse, of course, can bring better solutions for many places. So what you need to consider about water reuse, because water reuse schemes is quite complicated, because when you talk about water reuse, people say, okay, let's make water reuse for non-potable use, which is more maybe makes sense to use a water with a quality which is not enough for drinking, but could be used for toilet flushing and things like that. So what's the idea? How feasible, or how would be the results of investing in non-potable water reuse schemes in the way that we have right now? So considering the established cities and established settlements and things like that. What we need to think about, and of course, what sector or what economic sector we need to think about to invest. Of course, we need to have a lot of to answer a lot of questions about the implementation of water reuse. Of course, which is the user, who will use the water. So what are the potential demands that we will have to address? Decentralized or distributed demands. Of course, when you think about non-potable use, of course, is quite interesting to have a bigger consumer, like an industry. So you have the sewage plant, you have an industry plant which consumes a lot of water. It makes sense. You treat the wastewater and supply this water as industrial water for a lot of activities like cooling tower, cleaning process, and other things like that. And of course, the second issue is the quality of the reused water. So how safe will be the water that will be distributed? Because here in Brazil, we have many people who work with the conception of water reuse. So for toilet flushing, what is the quality of water that you need to flush the toilets? So it's quite difficult to answer because people, so you use water for toilet flushing. Toilet flushing, of course, you clean the water, you remove or sending the sewage or removing the sewage from close to the people. But of course, it should have be a quality, which is its quality. So, of course, inside a house, people who has children and pets knows that the children could be and go to the toilet flush and put his hands in the water and drink the water, or even the pets could drink the water. So now it's or not is important, the quality of this water. So in Brazil, there's a lot of people that just defend to use the water with the minimum treatment. But there is a risk for to spread diseases related to the water sewage. So the quality is a quite important issue. So we need to have standards to establish this standard in order the producers of this reused water can attend or can supply this water with safety. And of course, it will be related to the technology that we need to use. And as Professor had mentioned, and the distribution system is another issue. So here in Brazil, in the metropolitan region, maybe 8% of the investment in water distribution or water supply is related to the distribution system. For the sewage, it will be about 85% of the total investment. So the treatment is responsible for only 20 or 15%. So if you go to a modern technology or a new technology, if you double the cost, we'll use more than maybe instead of 20%, we'll go to 25, 30% of the total investment. And people think about, so I will not go to the new technology because it is expensive. But how expensive it is compared to doing nothing. So using the traditional or the business as usual, as the American colleagues used to use the terms. Of course, the cost is a quite important issue to be taken into account in order to implement some kind of reuse systems. And then here in Brazil, we start, as I mentioned, we start to talk some project related to non-potable reuse, but pretty much centralized water reuse schemes. The first one, which was implemented by Sabesp. Sabesp is a water supply company here in the São Paulo state. So in 1998, they implemented the first direct line for supplying reused water to a company, which is Coates Current, which a very low capacity, 70 liters per second, which is quite small. But 10 years later, we have another project in which the capacity was a little bit high, but for another company, which is the Center. Center is a paper industry for special papers production. And the most relevant project that we had implemented, it was implemented in 2012, which is the Aquapolo project. The Aquapolo project was designed to supply water for a petrochemical area because they are using potable water for the process. So this project, the discussion about this project started by the end of 1999. So I worked with the beginning planning of this project in 2000, 2002, with Professor Ivanir Espanhol and Professor Pedro Mancuso, who was a former professor here at the faculty. And only 10 years after we started to discuss it, the decision make was made. So this project was applied, and the new project that we have, it is in the Espírito Santo. It's not in São Paulo. It's the SESAM project, which is a project for supplying 200 liters per second of reused water for the company in the industrial sector in Vitória, which is the ArcelorMittal is the principal consumer of this project. I designed the project for this treatment plant for reuse. So the Aquapolo project is here. It's located in the ABC wastewater treatment from Sabesp. Here you can see the conventional wastewater treatment plant, which was started or implemented by the end of maybe the 80s. And you can see it is not operating with the full capacity because of the sewage lines that doesn't goes to the station. So half of the station was not used before, was not operational at that time because of the sewage, the sewers that didn't reach the treatment plant. So because at the beginning they decided, let's start with the treatment plants and then we go to the sewage system collection. It doesn't work quite well. So maybe 30 years after the implementation of the plant, it works only with half of the capacity because of the problems, as I mentioned. But anyway, here is in this area, we have the small circle here. We have the Aquapolo system, which is a tertiary MBR system, which catch the water, the sewage, treated sewage from the ABC, and treats additionally to remove nitrogen, basically. And then they also have reverse osmosis units because of the requirements stated by the company, the petrochemical company. Sometimes they need to use the reverse osmosis to address the salinity concentration for the process that they use there. Here is some pictures of the Aquapolo project. So the tertiary biological reactor and the MBR membranes, which is inside of the reactor. Here it's not possible to see the membranes because you have already the sewage. A picture of the water came from the tertiary MBR and the reverse osmosis system. So this reverse osmosis system, the total capacity of the system, the MBR, is 1,000 liters per second, and the reverse osmosis unit has a capacity of 200 liters per second of treatment, because not all the sewage treated will pass through the reverse osmosis system. So what are the limiting factors for non-potable use? So we have distributed demand, mainly here in Brazil. We did some study here in São Paulo metropolitan region to evaluate the potential for industrial water reuse. So we evaluated in all the 5 largest wastewater treatment plants that we have, and evaluating the radius of 10 kilometers from the sewage treatment plant to identify potential users, industrial users for the reused water. What was the results? Less than 3 cubic meters per second would be reused. Here in Brazil, in São Paulo metropolitan region, we have a production of about 50 or 60 cubic meters per second of sewage, and the potential for industrial use would be less than, of course, less 3 cubic meters per second or a little bit less. In a distance of 10 kilometers far from the sewage plant. Which was quite interesting is that the largest wastewater treatment plant had the less potential for water use because of the location, the planning. We should plan to locate the sewage treatment plant close to the consumers. Of course, it is more rational than to implement the sewage treatment plant and then develop the region around. And then, of course, the distributed demand, high cost for implementation of the distribution system, some quality issues of the treatment effluent because of the technology that had been chosen to treat the wastewater, which is a secondary treatment. And of course, the lack of reused water standards, because always when you talk about water reuse, so what are the standards that you need, or what are the quality for reused water that you need? So people want to have the same quality of the potable water or the natural water, but it should be planned to see if, of course, they need that quality of water. And one question is the technological innovation, which is a question because some people, some engineers in Brazil or some areas think that technological innovation is not important. So you need to go to the basic solutions. But of course, it's not possible to address complex problems with traditional technologies. You should go to new technologies in order to have good results for implementing these options for water reuse or things like that. So what are the trends for the future here in Brazil? What we are thinking about is potable use. So we don't have more a place to bring water to the metropolitan region. And of course, the scenario of scarcity, it's showing that it will not be possible to keep the same procedure related to the management of the reservoirs that we have. So potable use could be an option. Of course, there are some, at the same time that we had the water crisis in Brazil in 2014 to 2016, people in other parts of the world were also facing problems with water scarce. So here's a news from the United States now, where Texas started to run a direct potable use system. And of course, at the same time that we had the problems with water scarcity in São Paulo metropolitan region, Australia had a similar problem 2 years before. They implemented a lot of options, water desalination, water reuse, even for potable application. So this picture was already showed by Professor Francis, which is what are the concept of potable reuse. You have the concept of direct and indirect potable reuse. So the cities catch the water in a reservoir, and then they treat the water by conventional treatment system, the water used, and then the sewage is produced. You can move or direct this water for a treatment plant, and then you have reuse water. So indirect potable reuse, you need to have a buffer, which is a reservoir close to the place where you have the wastewater treatment plant, which is not so easy here in Brazil, in São Paulo metropolitan region, because most of the reservoirs that we have is about 20 kilometers or far from the nearest sewage treatment plant. So the costs of this system, this pipe, would be very significant. So we have the options for direct potable use, injecting the collection, the main of raw water, and directly in the treatment plant or in distribution system. So that is the options that you have. Of course, you have a sewage, a small fraction of the sewage that could not be recovered. You need to discharge to the environment. Of course, you will not discharge at the same reservoir that you use to catch the water. So, and for that, we have the concept of multiple barrier for implementing. So this is an arrangement that was proposed by, or not proposed, but it was defined by the experience from the countries that had implemented what direct potable use. So we have a lot of contaminants. Of course, it's quite difficult to address each contaminant individually. So you group the contaminants in dissolved organics, dissolved inorganics, suspended solids, and microorganisms. So you have the barriers to remove these contaminants. So the system that was consolidated for direct potable use is this. So you can use secondary wastewater treatment complemented by membrane filtration. If you combine both, you have the MBR systems. So you have the reverse osmosis, the advanced oxidation or the photochemical oxidation process, of course, the chlorination. This is a tray that has been maybe validated by the WHO for producing potable water using sewage, domestic sewage. So in that sense, we are developing now what we are doing here at USP in our department. We have developed a new project, which is called Altabas project. It's an alternative for drinking water production. So it's supported by FINEP, which is an agency, a Brazilian agency that founds research in Brazil. The title of project, the length, and the aim of the project. So you are developing a pilot plant to demonstrate the feasibility for producing drinking water from sewage. And then this is the first pilot plant that we tested in Campinas, Sanasa, which was supported by the PCJ. We studied, because in Campinas, Sanasa, they implemented the IMBR system for treating the sewage, and then they think about, so if we all have this MBR system, let's try to see if it's possible to produce drinking water with different technologies. So we implemented the system, which consisted, we combined here in this pilot plant 5 different technologies. which is reverse osmosis, which is behind this panel, UV oxidation process, activated carbon absorption, and also you have also a biological activated carbon system using ozone as a pre-oxidant. So we are able to combine all the combinations using only reverse osmosis oxidation process, reverse osmosis activated carbon, reverse osmosis biological, and everything together. And then we had verified that the best combination was reverse osmosis, UV oxidation process, and activated carbon for producing safe drinking water. This project was running by 2 years under our supervision, and after that, the people from Unicamp operated the system by 2 more years, evaluating a lot of chemicals that was present in the sewage, and even adding some chemicals to test the efficiency of the system for removing these chemicals. So, and then they just confirmed the arrangement that we had been proposed, which is reverse osmosis, UV oxidation process, and absorption in activated carbon. So now we are producing or developing a new pilot plant. In that case, we'll also include a MBR system. So at the Sanasa, they already had the MBR. In this project, it is a partnership between USP and Sabesp. We will implement an MBR pilot plant. We're using the membranes that we develop in our lab. So we also develop the membranes in our lab. After the MBR, we will pass the permeate from the MBR to a reverse osmosis system, from the reverse osmosis system to UV oxidation process, and finally to an absorption carbon process. And the idea is that the project is underway, so we are just constructing the pilot plant. It will be finished by the beginning of the next year. And we're hoping maybe April, May to start the operation of this pilot plant. And then also we are proposing a visiting center. It will be a demonstration unit. So we will have a specific building to install the project and make some arrangement for visiting from schools, from undergrad schools, or even from secondary schools or other kinds of interest people. And then here's how the building will be, the design. So the MBR system will be placed in this area, and other components will be installed in this area. So just to show how the visiting center will be. So we are also making a partnership with the people from the Faculdade de Saúde Pública also. Professor Maria Teresa is involved, who will work with the microbiological issues related to water reuse. It's only the images, and the final remarks for my presentation is what's the problem? The lack of planning in many metropolitan regions has induced water scarcity problem. Of course, the problems with water scarcity here in São Paulo is quite different from the northeast region of Brazil, or even in Manaus, they have problems with water scarcity. They have the Amazon River, but they don't use the Amazon River as a source for drinking water. They use groundwater. But we have some problems with planning, which is cause a lot of issues related to water scarcity. And of course, to cope with these problems, we need to have an integrated approach. Not only water reuse or water conservation. You need to combine all the tools that we have. Water conservation is the main one. So I think the most efficient way to use the resource is making a conservation program, like it was showed by the United States to reduce the water consumption by 75%, which is quite high. But it's possible to reduce, maybe not in Brazil. It's quite different, because in Brazil you have an average water consumption per person in the metropolitan region around 108 liters per person per day. In the United States, I think it's much more close to 300. So if you reach 50% or maybe 40% of reduction, it's significant. And we can do that by conservation, using more efficient fixture. Maybe 20-30% of reduction is possible. It will, of course, reduce the loss of water in the distribution system, because you need to move less water through the system. So, of course, you have less loss. Improvement of sanitation condition as better wastewater and water treatment systems or plants, and of course, planned water reuse programs. So we need to have a kind of directive for implementing water reuse in a safe way. So in order people can follow a established procedure in order to have the benefits of water reuse. Not only doing what many people want to do, so bringing the untreated sewage back to the people, which is quite complicated and is not adequate, because we saw the problems that Europe faced in the mid-century because of this sewage close to the people. So you have a lot of problems of disease. So the best thing that you had developed in this sanitation was to move the wastewater far from the people and treat it. So bring it back to close to the people. Of course, it's has a potential health problem, because, of course, we will expose the people to microorganisms that they are not familiar. And, of course, new technologies could play a significant role in all these options that we have here. So thank you very much for the audience, and that's it.
Thank you for the presentations. And there is a huge challenge. And taking notes from the presentations. And the first question that came to me, and that's something that I would like to provoke you, the two speakers, is within universities, especially that especially you two are quite engaged in the engineering courses. So if you think we are forming and graduating our students prepared for this challenge. Sometimes I think engineering is always moving forward, but on the other way, engineers sometimes are also very conservative for new solutions. So I think one very important barrier that's in our hands is related to our undergrad and postgrad courses. So the first question I would like I can hear. The first question, oh, smell coffee. Very good. So the first question would be our role as professors and researchers if we are doing this. I think it's also not only the engineers, but also how the engineering dialogue with the other course. For example, you told me that you have this project with Professor Maria Teresa. So it's not working.
Yes.
So do I have to?
I think so.
No. Okay, I can brief it again. So my point that I'm raising is related first for preparing the future professional generation. I mean, we as university and professors, if we think our engineering course are strong enough, I would say innovative enough to prepare our future professionals to deal with these kind of challenges. This kind of challenge means, first of all, technological challenges, but also the capacity to dialogue with other fields, for example, as public health and other social aspects that we are talking about, inequalities. So this would be the first question I raise for the two professors and speakers here about our university, and especially also if our engineering courses are also prepared and dialoguing in, I would say now in undergrad teaching programs, but also in the postgrad research, because I see most of our research are disciplinary research. Although they include many aspects of engineering, they not always bring other fields of knowledge that are very necessary in the case of the topic we are discussing today. So I would like to start. Yeah.
So this is a really important point, right? It's a really important point. So well, personally, actually, my own sort of evolution into thinking the way I think now is really a product of a lot of experiences and exposures, right? How do we make this more organized and more integrated into our curriculum? We think always of our curriculum or the way we think about education as T-shaped, right? So we have a broad education, but then we also specialize. So there's breadth and there's depth, right? Sometimes I joke that maybe it's not enough to have the T-shape, but more like a pie shaped. Maybe we have two expertise areas, right, that we can integrate. So the first answer is having very strong fundamentals in engineering on the physical, chemical, and biological principles is still very important, right? Because no matter what the technologies are, whether they're membranes or new reactors, it will always come down to the fundamental principles of physical, chemical, biological processes. So that's the first thing. I think the curriculum of the future needs to integrate four things. So I was sitting here, I was listing down the four in my head, right? One is for us environmental engineers to be more aware of the public health side of things. and now we're talking about One Health, global One Health, right? So it's not just public health, also environmental health, and also animal health, because that's, a lot of contamination is from animal waste, and also a lot of diseases coming out are zoonotic diseases. They're coming from animals as reservoirs of the disease agent. So public health, and part of that is an understanding of risk assessment. Um, right now, we're trained to meet certain standards. Give me the number I need to meet, what X milligrams per liter of the contaminant, and I will design the uh, the technology that will get us from influent to that number, right? As opposed to thinking about it from a risk assessment standpoint, where we say the way we get to that number is by thinking about the overall risks to to humans using the system and to humans being exposed to the system. So I don't think that we have enough risk assessment courses in our curriculum. So public health and risk assessment is one. The other one is some exposure to community engagement, working with different stakeholders. This requires that our students be exposed to communities, how to talk to different kinds of communities that may be a different socioeconomic status. Um, this can be done through practicums. This can be done through field work. Maybe part of the thesis might be something related to that. In fact, in some of my colleagues are thinking about, if you have a PhD dissertation, uh, maybe the 2 or 3 chapters are the technical side, but then one chapter is on equity and community engagement and social issues. To show that you actually engage with the community, right? So how do you talk to different communities that are affected by their own problems? So a little bit of social science there, right? We can learn a lot from our social science colleagues. Um, the third, I think, that's really important now is engagement with data. With data. I think we have no choice, but we're going to have lots and lots of data in the future. And so statistics and even some understanding of AI and machine learning and all these tools. These are the things that we have to make sure our students also have um, some background in, because I think we're going to have to deal with these large data sets that are coming from sensors that, basically it's inevitable, right? A lot of the systems will be operated this way. So not everybody is going to be trained the same way, and not everybody would want to be trained the same way. So some engineers would concentrate on one of these things, but I think exposure to these things, so public health and risk assessment, community engagement, and then some data science background, I think would be important as we try to think about what I call the engineer of the future. And I might think of another thing while I'm sitting here, but I think those are the 3 main things that come to mind. Yeah. Oh, one more thing. Sorry. Sorry. No, I think now I thought of it. Which is, we teach this already, but it needs to be embedded more, which is systems thinking, right? So it's not like solving one part of the problem, but understanding how that one part affects the others. So, some framework for that, whether it's, life cycle assessment, whether, it's considering everything, carbon, energy, emissions, cost. So if you have systems thinking, and now resilience also, right? Because sometimes we may calculate all these things at steady state, but we did not factor in the fact that now we're going to have a sudden climate change event, sudden flooding, right? So one of the things I'm thinking about is, we used to design systems, infrastructure, um, for a certain probability, right? So we don't design this building for, 300 years. We expect this building is going to stand 50 years. Maybe we're lucky, 70 years, right? And then we have to do something. We have to replace it. The question is, if we expect, let's say, flooding happening now every 10 years, and that flooding is going to wipe out the whole thing, how do we factor in the low probability with the cost, right? Because usually we say the probability times the damage. That's how we calculate things, right? But now we have lower probability events but high damage. How do I think about that? Do we factor that in? Uh, it's something that I think we need to rethink our frameworks. Thinking about that and incorporating that into systems thinking. Not thinking about steady state, but thinking about resilience and how well my infrastructure can actually cope with climate change events. So I don't think we've done a good job of putting those metrics together, right? Because usually our sustainability metrics are environment, economics, social, right? Those are sustainability. To me, I'm going to add climate resilience there because that's a total unknown um, that we're going to see more and more in the future. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a lot already I said about education.
Well, it's quite hard to speak now after all the consideration that have been done by Professor. But in any case, I will evaluate your question considering the process of education that we have here in Brazil, which is quite different from the United States, because there, I think most of the things that Professor had mentioned already happened. Here in Brazil, of course, I completely agree that we need to have a strong base in specific knowledge, like physics, chemistry, maths, and things like that. But of course, which is a problem is to make the students to be responsible for their education. Because here in Brazil, we have the sense that the student goes to the school and the teacher is responsible for pass everything to them. So they just sit there and are listening the teacher, and then they do some homework that is presented to them. And of course, they are very passive, like he don't interact quite a lot. And of course, I think it's important to have a thinking to the future. So because most of the students are undergraduate students that will form or to have the degree, they will work for the problems that you have more than 5 years ahead of they got the graduation. And what I saw is many of the classes that you have focus on things that happened in the past. So it's not important. Of course, the past, which had been passed, is important to learn about things that you don't need to repeat. But otherwise, you need to evaluate what can do for the new problems that we'll face. So many engineering, you are thinking about when you do a project of a building. So the building is expected to last for 30 years. What will happen 30 years ahead today about the water issues? So you have enough water to have the same hydraulic system that you have, or the same way to use the energy, things like that. So we need to be more proactive in terms of thinking about what is the possibility of the future and how we need to direct the development to don't have problems that we had in the past. So I think this is important to teach the students to think about the future. So which is not be the same thing that they had, because for now, what we are facing as a professional is the problems that we had made in the few years ago or even now. But these problems will be quite different from after the student had been graduated. So I think you need to make they to be more curious or more engaged about their formation in the future. So how to learn different things that they are receiving and the knowledge that they are receiving now. So things will be different. So it was very different when I graduated. The problems, so we had one type of problem. No one have been speaking about climate change, things like that. So now, of course, is a different issue. Of course, you have other problems that you need to be faced by these students. So I think we need to be more proactive in order to incentivize the students to learn by themselves. How to learn is quite important also, I think.
Just some comments. I agree. I think the university, especially here at the University of São Paulo, but in the whole Brazil, we are being pushed to rethink curriculum with more services to community extension. And this is quite related to this, what you were saying about this community engagement. So I think this has already begun here. I would say to give more attention to this point. I think it's very important, but I agree with the system thinking to be included, this nexus, life cycle analysis, resilience. I think we still lack of this in our courses. Some courses are very, very closed. It's very different, as you said, the way they design the program in the United States. The students design their program, and the way here in Brazil, it's very, very, I would say, closed. You cannot change it too much, especially in engineering. That's a lot of these courses and so on, but related to engineering. So they cannot take other courses outside. So it's more flexible, I would say, United States. But so here is a challenge for us. And I agree with you, Miersva, especially this proactivity and how because I think it's two things: how you also prepare the professors and the teachers to give class. I mean, how they teach, so they don't just not bring the slides and giving the information and so on. They do not dialogue or with the students, but also on the other way, how you incentivize students to learn, to study, and also to criticize and question. Sometimes they are quite used just to sit, listen to the professor or the teacher and go to the other class. So I think it's something we have to work with the students, but also a lot with I would say, to the teachers. So yes, that's I think these are very important points. Data analysis, what I think it's also very important. More and more, you were showing in your presentation all these sensors that could be implemented. I can imagine how much information will come from this and how we are prepared to deal with this. So this was, I would do one more question and then I open for others questions. And the second questions, when you both were showing the challenges and the trends, and I don't know how it works in the United States, but I think it's the same. But we are facing in Brazil, I would say, a question of credibility in the system. So people do not really trust. I mean, you have, for example, water treatment system and wastewater, and then you have the numbers, you have the indicators, but people really do not trust in that. For example, there is still in many areas, I would say in São Paulo, people still buy, the water quality is very good, but people do not trust, and they buy water, they pay much more expensive the liter, because they do not trust the system, that what they are drinking. And so the question is, in this context of low credibility in the system, how I could imagine how difficult it would be to think about circularity, especially in this aspect of water reuse. So how do you think this, in terms of how we really, what's our role now, again, coming back to the university? Because I think the university is a very important reference when we talk about credibility, because it has much to do with the scientific knowledge about public health, or One Health, as you were saying, and again, reaching people on sustainability education. So again, I ask if we when we develop this technology, or we propose these alternatives, if we are communicating this with the society on the right way. Maybe we are doing the things quite well in our labs, but we are not communicating. I could add again also that there is a huge resistance also of the regulators. I still think the regulators are, I would say, in my point of view, very resistant also to change. So one huge barrier would be this credibility about society on the water and wastewater treatment systems, but also the regulator is again also always, they tend to say no. So for example, you were saying about the standards, how long, I would think how many years it would take to to develop this. So again, it's my question for both. I don't know, maybe you want to start now. What do you think?
Well, it's a quite big challenge, but I think the most important thing, the first one, is transparency. So people should be, I think the companies should be more clear about what they are doing, involve or bring the people to see what they are doing related to water treatment. As I mentioned, this pilot plant is a way to show that what we are doing is not a thing that will make bring some problems to them, but to solve some problems. And maybe in Brazil have some difficulties in that, because many companies, the data about water quality, or even if they disclose, is not very clear for the people. Of course, we had here in Brazil legislation that had enforced the companies to disclose some water quality parameters in the bills. But if you look at the parameters that you have in the bill, people will not understand nothing. So what is that? The problem. I think transparency is very important, and of course the information disclosure to bring the people and to show that what they are doing is the best for the community, not to hiding something and or that they are doing some not a irregular thing, or so I will provide some water that you will not be adequate for water consumption or things like that, or I will not treat the wastewater in a way that I should treat. And of course, the community should be also involved, which is quite important. So because many of people doesn't mind about the water that came into their house, or even to the sewage that go out from their house. They just want to having the water and having the sewage moving out for their house. So that is, yeah, and of course, I think to another thing is to implement the necessary measures to uh, assure the water quality that the companies are distributing to the people. So if they identify some problem, they should be proactive in order to implement the correction that they think that should be implemented. I think that.
Thank you, Mir.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with the transparency aspect of it. I think as an industry, we pride ourselves in almost hiding, right? Like we don't want people to know where the wastewater treatment plant is. We just, we don't want people to even worry about it. And I think it is where maybe we should think about it the other way around. How do we actually involve people? This is hard. How do we involve people in decision making? In what I would call co-design. This is something I'm also grappling, right? How do I design with community organizations? They don't know engineering, right? So my approach is I know the solution. Um, I'm just going to tell you which one, or at the very minimum, I'm going to give you a list of 2 or 3 choices, and that's it, right? And I think there's a process there where we can actually learn from each other, where I know I have the technical background, but you have the experience, you know the preferences, you know the limitations of the community. Maybe it's even political, right? We know that for a lot of decentralized projects, the success of some of these projects actually hinge on the community organizer and the leader, right? If they are really, really well trusted by the community, the project will have a higher probability of success. So it's really learning how to do this co-design in an active way, because water and sanitation are very, very connected to people's lives. I think about credibility, and let's think about which companies to you are the most trusted companies. Which brands are the brands that you trust, right? And why? I mean, Coca-Cola, yes. Actually, the survey showed. Actually, actually, Coca-Cola is always up there when you do these surveys, and then you ask why, right? It's a combination of marketing. It's a combination of, presence. Um, you think about how do we change behavior, right? In Japan, for example, in the 1950s, they changed basically to these fancy toilets and flushing and the Toto toilets. How did they do this? Well, they did employ some very smart strategies. They used famous actresses. They tapped into a culture of hygiene and cleanliness. So there's a little bit of marketing there. There's a little bit of being smart about how you communicate. For example, I'm going to tell you this. Instead of calling it like San Diego, instead of calling it water reclamation or water resource recovery, they're calling it water purification, right? Because if people say water reuse, oh, it's used water from before, right? So even there's emotional baggage behind the words. The toilet to tap, that's really bad, right? Why did you even call that toilet to tap? It's really not right. There's so many processes in between. And it's actually very, very clean. It's cleaner than what you would find in your source water. So even some of that kind of thinking, and then involving the community would be part of it. Sometimes I wonder, right? People who say they don't trust science, they don't trust experts, yet they're on their computers and using Wi-Fi and online, and they don't understand how it works, right? I mean, we fly planes, we get on a plane, we don't really understand how the thing works. you know so we rely on science every single day, and yet people just think they know more because they've done their own research. I mean, so part of that is really being upfront and transparent and saying this is what we're doing, this is what being honest about how to involve communities, not just telling communities what to do, and also building almost personal relationships. This is really where utilities, they really need to almost build relationships in the communities, because the projects that I have seen that are successful really base these on relationships with the major leaders, with the community people, right? Um, in one town in Cary, close to where I live, um, there was a subdivision that's close to the wastewater treatment plant. It's a very fancy subdivision. And people were complaining about, ooh, the trucks with the biosolids are going down the street and I can smell it and so on, right? What the treatment plant did was they actually talked to the one person who's not even an elected official, but there's one or two people in the community who are kind of like the connectors, right? They're very influential. They're like the neighborhood um, guardians. And once they built a relationship with that one person, all the problems went away. They just involve this person every day. They almost like talk to this person, make it transparent. This is what's happening today. This is what's happening. And that person was actually the one who was doing the communication and the marketing to the whole neighborhood. So it's really based on personal relationships. And then I have this belief, I may be wrong, that when the day comes when we can actually look at the data, or maybe even a picture of the data, maybe it's red, yellow, green, I don't know, green is good water or something like that. We can search for it on our phone and we can see what's going on in our own house or our own systems. I'm hoping that people will say, oh, okay, I see the data, or I see the software, and okay, I trust that that's what's going on. I don't know, maybe that's a naive belief, but I think the more data you show people and put it in a way that they can understand it, hopefully they can come around and believe that, yeah, your water is safe. Yeah.
Thank you, Francis and Miersma, my friend. I think I have some questions here. Yes, please, Sabrina.
Thank you very much. So I have questions for both of you, but I think I will start with Professor Miersma. Professor, you were talking about how the distance is a problem for industrial reuse, correct? In the municipality of Jundiaí, that is in the PCJ basins, you've been there. I don't know if you have already been there, but they have probably the biggest project of producing and commercializing biosolids, I think, in the whole country. And so circular economy is already there. Then once I was visiting their WWTP, and I asked them about the water reuse, and they said that the distance was a problem because the industrial park is quite distant from the station, from the plant. So my question is, do you think that the distance and the money is the only reason why we don't have projects like the Aquapolo in Brazil, or there's another problem? I know that law is a problem in Brazil, but I think that for industrial reuse, maybe law is not a big problem because the industries can establish their own standards. So is there anything else besides the money and distance?
Basically, what happened is if the industry does have natural water, which is cheaper, the problem is that mainly in many regions here in the São Paulo metropolitan, in São Paulo state, I did some studies for water reuse, industrial water reuse in the some water basins in the countryside of the state, but the people said, so I have a better water quality, which is much cheaper for me. Why I will pay for you maybe 4 reals for a cubic meter? But because I can have the water free, practically free for use. So one of the problems related to water reuse is that why the Aquapolo worked well, because they didn't have any other options. The same is for the project from Cezanne, which is, it was agreement because when we have the water crisis in 2004, 2016, the industrial complex there are using potable water for supplying the process, and people in the city were without water, so facing some kind of restriction in the consumption. And the problem is, of course, the incentivization for the industries or to charge more for the clean water instead of giving the water for free. So I think this is the real problem that we have. The price of the water is not significant for the industry to move them to water reuse. That's the reason. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, yeah. So maybe if you had also, you talked about technological innovation, maybe technologies that are cheaper to produce,
Yes,
reuse water would kind of solve this problem.
Yes, because I was working, I just was commenting to Professor Franz about the desalination plant that had been designed to the Fortaleza city. So is it cheaper compared? So what I will compare with what? So which is more cheaper, having water or don't having water? So don't having water is much more expensive than the desalination or any kind of technology. So the question about the technology, of course, if you use the technology, it will be more cheaper after some time. Of course, it will be the only solution that we have. So you need to, when you talk about mainly like wastewater treatment, people say, so I have this technology which is much cheaper than that. Okay, but how is the quality that this technology offers compared to this one? What will be the impact that will cause in the receiving body using this cheaper technology? Because I will avoid the people to use the water for many other purpose. So how much it will cost you don't if you cannot use the water after this water was polluted. So this is, I think, people should think about. It's not the price that you pay for treating the sewage, but it's the price that you pay for not using the water. I think it will be much more.
Good morning. I have much more provocation than a question. I'm a sociologist, and I have a question about the people. Where we can put the people in this equation. The point of view of the engineering, from my view too, is perfect. I don't see anything about it to criticize the rationality of the solution by engineering or economics, because we have the rationality of the process. But the people is not rational, is the behavior. And the behavior, we have two principles point, that is the culture, the background of the people, this have a construction of the perspective, of the values, and the mode, and they have a problem, they fix it. And the politics is 2 point of view. How much is the cost to me, and how much are you received of benefits with the change this perspective. When we talk about the reuse for drinking principle, we have the problem of the culture. I have a repulse, I think, about the use of the water when it's treated with the sewage, with the deject, human deject. And the politics, we have the interest, how many costs, if it's, the change impact to me, no, if it's benefit brings for the society. So the question is this: when, where, how the people
So
in the question.
I can give you many examples. I'm thinking right now of 3 examples, right? Of how this worked out. So the first example is Singapore with a new water project. If you talk to any Singaporean right now, they're actually very proud of that system. So in Singapore, 50% of their water is from wastewater, essentially. The new water project. And the way they did this was, again, very clear. And Singapore is maybe a unique example because as a country, they're used to following the government, right? If the government tells them no chewing gum, they follow. So in some ways, it may be a different kind of culture, like you said. But my point is the Singapore New Water Project, they were very clear about this is what we're doing, right? This is the quality of the water that you have. We compare that. You see, it's very safe, and we did all of the years of testing and research. And now people are actually very proud in Singapore that they are very, conservation and sustainable and so on. San Diego in California is the same thing. The technology is there. It's the acceptance of the people, right? Especially when you talk about direct potable reuse, because indirect is easy to. Some people think that if I put that into a lake or a reservoir, a natural buffer, and then I get the water from that, it's okay. But if they do straight from pipe to pipe, then it's like not okay. But actually, when you put it into a natural receiving body of water, you're exposing it to more contamination. If you think about it, right? There's going to be runoff, there's going to be organisms, and so on. And actually, the pipe to pipe is much, much cleaner because you know exactly what's in the water. So in California, they did a huge, community engagement, marketing. On the one hand, the people know that if they have another drought, they're gonna have less water. So the problem is already very clear. So the cost, like Professor Mirshwa was saying, what's the cost of not having any water? It's very, very high. So the people were aware of the problem. And then the second part was getting them to accept that this is very, very clean water and it's going to be safe. And the way you do that is to really showing the data, the results. And so just being very clear about that. My third example is in North Carolina. I work with this community. They have a problem of, this is a wastewater problem. The community actually became officially bankrupt because of their sewage issues. They cannot pay the sewage collection and treatment fees because it's a small town, 105 houses. The state government took over the town because the town was bankrupt because of the sewage collection system. And so the state appropriated $15 million to solve the problem. The Department of Environmental Quality in North Carolina then called me up and said, hey, the consultant who was saying, let's replace the old sewage system is saying $15 million. I said, that's too high. $15 million divided by 100 households, that's a lot of money per household. You can just actually give them, pay them to go away. They will do that, right? I said, maybe my students can design a better system. It's a student project talking about community engagement and giving students autonomy, and so they did this as the senior design, and they found a decentralized solution that actually is going to cost like half of the cost, maybe $5 to $10 million cheaper. But this solution requires community input. As the household owner, I need to maintain something. Every 6 months, I need to have this checked, and then every year, I need to have this maintained. But given the costs before and how much you're going to pay versus the household maintenance and how much you're going to pay, they are choosing the one where they actually are more involved in their system. So I think explaining the costs and benefits goes a long way into changing that culture. I have another example, sorry, which is a personal example, how people change. Okay, so in the U.S., people are wipers, right? So the world is wipers and washers. You either use water for cleaning, anal cleansing, or you use toilet paper, right? So in Southeast Asia, in Muslim countries, it's water. You cannot change that. That's religion almost, right? In the U.S., it's toilet paper, right? Wiping, and maybe Brazil also, right? Wiping, right? Okay. Personally, I grew up in the Philippines. I was a washer. I used water. I moved to the U.S. I became a wiper. Okay. So personally, I changed my behavior. Now I've changed again, and I found the best solution, which is you can buy these attachments to your toilet, and you can connect that to the water line, and you can have a dial, and there's something will wash your, right, and it's it will wash it with a spray of water, and then you can use toilet paper to dry. And to me, that is where the future is going to be, because I feel like this is cleaner. It uses less toilet paper. It uses less water if I compare it to the usual method. And so just reflecting on my personal behavior, I have changed how I use the toilet. And I think it's possible to do that on a massive scale. So cultural behavioral change is possible, I think. It's just a matter of time and showing a better approach. So I mean, when I go and give talks, I always tell people, go to Amazon or wherever, right? Or I don't know if it's Mercado Libre here, but go to Amazon, buy this $20 thing for your toilet. It will change your life, because it's really clean, and you will use less toilet paper, and it's better if you have a septic tank. You have less toilet paper going in. I think personal behavior can change. Now, I don't know if it's going to work in, like, for example, Muslim countries, because that's really part of the religion. But I think it's possible how people interface with technology changes, right? 20 years ago, well, maybe 15 years ago, nobody had touch screen, right? Phones. I don't know if you remember the days of Blackberries or even before that, right? Now, we all change our behavior. And to me, the technology drove that, right? The iPhone did not ask for consumers, what do you want? No, it was like, we're going to do this. I don't know if that works all the time, where the technology drives the behavior, but I'm seeing it also, right? I'm seeing it in EVs, because now cars in the US, they have a little touchscreen there, right? I mean, they're driving the thing using touchscreen, and I think it's changing behavior. Technology can change behavior, and that's why we have to think about it also, because sometimes the behavior is not what we want. But anyway, I think it's possible. I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but those are examples. Thank you.
You had another question.
Actually, two questions, but I'm going to try to be quick. You showed us that system, that decentralized system, and you talked about the digitalization operation, etc. And you present the advantages of this. I'd like to know if you see some disadvantages or big challenges. And the other question, trying to be quick again, is that here in the discussion, you talked about the system thinking. And I don't know, some years ago, in the 80s, 90s, the concept was resource recovery. Now we still have this concept, but there is the circular economy idea appearing in the last, I don't know, two decades maybe. Do you think that circular economy idea is helping with the system thinking in the water and wastewater management?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So the quick answer to your second question is yes. I mean, circular economy is systems thinking, right? If you think about it, so yeah, I think yes. The first question was disadvantages. Oh, there's a lot, right? I mean, essentially, when it goes wrong, it can be horrible, right? I mean, but it's like any other system. When you have a car, you rely on it every day, but when it goes wrong, you suddenly have a flat tire or your engine quits and you're on the highway, then it's potentially disastrous, really bad, right? So the way you avoid that is you maintain your car, right? It's like any other machine. It's going to break down, but you maintain it, oil change. Before you go on a long trip, you get it checked by your mechanic, right? So you trust it. Or you say, okay, I'm going to design for situations. So I bring a spare tire in case I get a flat tire on the road, right? Or I have my, in the US, it's AAA. I can call somebody and somebody will come help me right away. So any system is going to break down. Imagine if what I was showing you, and I didn't bring those slides where we actually designed a house with all of the pipes, the gray water pipes, yellow pipes, purple pipes, and show that it's not a lot of pipes compared to your traditional system. It's really not. If you construct a house, it's not even going to add, 1%, 2% to the cost, the pipes alone, but the inside the house. But the treatment, of course, is something else. So if something goes wrong, then yeah, I mean, it might smell, you don't want to get sewage into, so, but it's kind of like any other system, right? I mean, right now, we have that happening in sewer lines. We have sewer overflows, right? When it floods, we get flood water mixed in with sewage water in the streets. So it's just a matter of perspective again. But like any machine, it's got to be maintained, and that's why it's important to think about how robust the technology is. It can't be just something that works in the lab or works under perfect conditions. It's got to be technologies that can work under a variety of, unusual or stress conditions. Yeah.
I have one last question for me, my colleague from the engineering school of the University of São Paulo, but maybe Francis can also add something. I was in the last years, sometimes the students from environmental engineer, they complain that they have too much disciplines about water and sanitation and less other things. So sometimes they are, let's say, they are not very fond of working on project or developing this. Do you think, what do you think is the cause? Because at the end, when I've seen many of the students that are leaving the engineering course, they are going some way working with water and sanitation at the end. So in terms of professional opportunities, very big. We have a huge demand. In the last years, I remember most of the people working on water and sanitation, they were civil engineers. And now the majority is environmental engineers, especially because the civil engineers, unfortunately, they have very few disciplines and courses on and skills on water and sanitation. Unfortunately, because I think we should keep both working. But what's your perception about this, and how could we improve in our engineer courses this will to work and to like working with water and sanitation? Otherwise, this could also be a problem if we don't have the engineers wanting to go to this field. What do you think?
Oh, it's a very good question, because one of the, are you talking about the environmental engineering course from our department? One of the problems, I think the students are correct in their observation, because the course was developed from the civil engineering course. So many of the professors just moved the course for the water and sanitation. So it was quite different from the environmental engineering that the people think, because when you think about the environmental engineering, it's not only water. You have the water, the atmospheric pollution, the soil, the wastes, the solid waste, and a lot of things. So I think this complaint, of course, I received a lot of them, because it was hard to change. But during the years, you have been changing the course, giving more other topics related not only to water and wastewater, but still now we have some kind of preference of some professors, because many of the professors that started the environmental engineering course were civil engineers. I was the only one different, because I'm a chemical engineer. So I understand that environmental engineering was more complex than water only. But now we are changing. Of course, I understand water mainly now is important, wastewater, but other topics are also important, like some kind. We have problem with contaminated soil, because sometimes I receive some demands from companies, and we are not preparing quite well the engineers to face this kind of problems, because there's a lot of companies that starts to do some working about that, but they don't know exactly what they are doing. They are going by try and error. So it's a problem, because I have received a consult right now to be a consultant from a company, because they are trying to decontaminate the soil for more than 15 years. They discovered the contamination, the environmental agency enforced them to solve the problem. They hired a company who developed a work by more than 10 years, and they didn't solve the problem, because they didn't evaluate basic things like the concept of the properties of the contaminant, how it interacts with the soil, to things. And I think this is a problem. But now I understand the relevance of water, but it's also important to have the others subject areas. So now we are reorganizing our course in order to remove this this feeling of the students, because we just hired now 5 environmental engineers as a professor. So until 2 years ago, we didn't have anyone. So now we have 5. So now it's time to give a change in the structure of the course.
Very good. What's
So I don't know if your program is you're ABET accredited also, right? With the American, ABET, yeah. So like in the US, there's an accreditation body called ABET, And so they actually tell you these are the outcomes, right? We need you to teach courses so that the students can do this, this, and this. And that includes things like communication, things like, design, problem solving, math skills, all kinds of things. And so your courses have to meet, you have to show that your courses and the metrics you measure the students by course or by exams or interviews and so on, you show that you meet the objectives. So in some ways, our curriculum is constrained by that, right? We have to teach these classes because otherwise we will not meet the ABET requirements. But then we can design for some flexibility, but it's not as flexible as other majors actually, because you have to basically teach these sets of courses and then the rest are electives. So some students, they can take some more electives in water, some more electives in solid waste, or some other, they can fashion their curriculum, but otherwise we need to make sure everybody, the curriculum passes under the ABET rules,
Well, very good. Still a challenge, and that's nice that Escola Politécnica is moving. I think in the São Carlos School of Engineering, we already have 4, I think now, environment engineers. So that's good. That's easier to dialogue and also bring innovations to the course. So to do it broader, especially here in São Paulo, atmospheric air pollution is a huge problem, and sometimes it's only a very small topic in the course. Also this soil pollution and so on. Oh, that's good. Can we conclude it? Okay, so again, I think we achieve our goal for today. It was to discuss this topic and see possibilities and also opportunities for partnerships. So I would like to thank both professors, Professor France and Professor Mierzwa, and also to thank all the colleagues that are watching us and brought some ideas. So thank you very much. And with this, I conclude the day of this morning.
O amanhecer não é apenas uma nova manhã, mas o nascimento de ideias que têm o poder de remodelar o futuro. É assim que trabalhamos.
Se você não sabe, chegou a hora de saber. A USP é de todos, a USP está em você.
Nos dias atuais, o tema sustentabilidade tem se destacado e a discussão sobre a qualidade dos recursos ambientais vem à tona para repensarmos sobre nosso modo de vida.